Today I'll be comparing my favorite camera, my Leica M7, to my new camera, my Intrepid 4x5. Alright, so I recorded this video yesterday. I went into edit and it sucked because I haven't taken my ADD medication in like 10 years and it was all over the place and I was trying to salvage it, but I'm focused, drank a ton of coffee, and I'm gonna tell you about my first year with my Leica M7. This is my baby right here. In this video I'll talk about some of the features that differentiated from a traditional Leica body, like my MP over here, and some of the features that I like, some of the features I don't like, and just the experience of using this camera day to day, both professionally and personally. A little bit about me and the type of photography that I do so that you understand how these cameras are used. I'm primarily an astrophotographer. I go on road trips looking for dark skies and documenting them because I dedicate all my work to light pollution awareness. And I'm actually working on my first museum exhibit, which will open autumn of 2021. During the day, I'm almost exclusively shooting film. I pretty much never touch my digital camera unless it's for astrophotography or, in this case, for video. The M7 was released in the early 2000s, I think 2002, within about a year of the release of the MP, and this was a modern take on the traditional film rangefinder that Leica started making with the M3 back in the 1950s. It feels a lot like the M10. If you've ever handled an M10, or I guess the M10B that doesn't have the screen on the back, the body is extremely similar. It's a very good comparison. If the M10 could shoot film, it would basically be an M7, from what I can tell. I don't have an M10, so I don't handle one every day, but I've handled one multiple times, and it is comparable to this body. The primary difference between the M7 and any other Leica film body is pretty much a circuit board. It has an electronic shutter and is electronically controlled. It requires batteries. The other Leica cameras don't require batteries. My MP takes a battery. It actually takes the same battery, which is very convenient. But if this battery dies, it's not that big of a deal because I can just meter by eye or use an external light meter or use a phone app, and all of the shutter speeds still work on that camera. On the M7, however, you only get 1/60th and 1/25th of a second. The M7's reliance on batteries is definitely a fair detractor from making this purchase decision, but I'm only on my second set of batteries and I've put maybe 100 rolls of film through this camera so far. That leads me to the reason I'm actually making this video. I feel that this is an underrated camera and a lot of people talk shit about the Leica M7, and I get defensive. I'll be honest. I think that this is an excellent tool. I think that this is a workhorse camera, and I think that this is a reliable body. Anytime the M7 comes up in conversation online, the argument's always the same. Oh, I'm not gonna be able to pass this on to my grandkids. Oh, it's not gonna last me 6,000 years. It's not gonna be an heirloom. This is not an heirloom camera. You don't purchase an M7 to pass on to your grandkids. You purchase an M7 to take pictures. So, like I said, I get it. A hand-built, mechanical, battery-free camera from Leica is what the M experience is all about, right? I get it, trust me, and that's why I have the MP. I'm just saying that the M7 is not terribly far off from the experience of using a fully mechanical M body. Some of my favorite features of the M7 are, well, like I just said, it's a brass camera. This thing feels absolutely solid. I have bonked this thing all over and it's still in great condition. It has some wear marks, but this did come back from servicing recently. It still has, they had to replace the bottom plate, and I haven't removed that. I should remove that on with like a macro lens so you can get that peeling feeling. I'll try that. I'm gonna leave it on, and if I remember, I'll do that. The electronic shutter in this camera is stupid accurate. When you listen to it, you can tell the difference between how it's timed versus a mechanical shutter, and it's really interesting to listen to. So let me cut to that real quick. A feature people don't seem to know about this camera is that in the aperture priority mode, you can actually shoot at half-stop increments. For most people, that's not a big deal. A lot of color negative film, and especially black and white negative film, have a lot of latitude in terms of how you expose them. But when shooting slide film, which I do pretty often, you only have like 6 stops of dynamic range. You don't have all that exposure latitude, and being able to use the auto exposure lock in this camera, which none of the other cameras have, obviously, and be able to lock in at a half-stop increment, it's immensely useful. That lighting was a little harsh, so you can see why I trust this meter so much. When you learn to use the auto exposure lock in this camera, you can read a scene very quickly, lock into the most appropriate number, and then recompose and snap your shutter. That's a really useful feature that I think is really underrated with this camera. I do a similar thing with my MP where I'll still read, it's still that same center weighted meter, where you can read the whole thing, you see the arrows pop up. This is just a more efficient way of doing that, and like I said, fastest way to shoot a Leica rangefinder. The viewfinder in this camera is a lot more modern compared to the MP, M6, and especially the previous versions that didn't have a meter. It's a little bit smaller in display, the arrows appear a little sharper, it shows live shutter speeds, information about the ISO of the film, whether or not you have a flash connected, and probably some other stuff that I don't even know about. The last favorite feature of the M7 that I have is simply that it has an on and off switch. It prevents something from accidentally tripping my shutter when the camera's in my bag and wasting a frame, which has happened to me with my MP quite often since I got a shutter release button. I think I might have to remove that soon because that's really frustrating. This shit's expensive. Lastly, I'm going to mention some of my least favorite features of the M7, or maybe features it's lacking, or just things I don't like about using the M7 as a daily carry camera. I'm going to start right back with the on and off switch. There is a huge frustration with the on and off switch if you are in aperture priority mode. When you turn the camera on, it actually flashes the ISO of the film for about 2 seconds. During that time, you can't hit the shutter. Let me just demonstrate, it's easier to just show you. So you flip it on, it's in auto mode, you flip it on, you try to hit the shutter button, nothing happens until it stops flashing. There, on that last one, it finally took the photo. That's annoying, but it's an easy fix actually. Just don't turn the camera off. If you leave the camera on and you don't hit the shutter halfway, the meter turns off after like 15 seconds. You don't have to constantly turn it on and off every time you want to take a picture. If you're out shooting, I just leave it on. I've left this camera on for probably like a week straight and the battery didn't die because nothing was touching my shutter button. Yeah, so that's an easy fix, but it is really frustrating when you're trying to take a picture very quickly. My other least favorite feature is if the battery dies, I only get 2 shutter speeds. The batteries last a really long time. I always have spares in my bag because they're absolutely tiny, but I'm out in the wilderness a lot with just my camera on my shoulder and nothing else because I am generally a very unprepared person in life. But that's a frustration, and it's one of the reasons I like having the MP, is if that battery dies, I can meter by eye pretty well, and I use a couple different apps. Last con of this camera is, in my opinion, a huge missed opportunity from Leica. With the electronic shutter, they decided to introduce 2 new shutter speeds. Awesome, right? That's 2 more stops of light. However, they added them on the wrong end of the spectrum, in my opinion. They added 2 seconds, 4 seconds, in addition to bulb mode, which is on every other camera. I don't know why they did that. I would rather they have added 2 stops of light on the faster shutter speeds to allow me to control my depth of field during the day. Kind of frustrating. It would have eliminated the need for an ND filter, which I don't even have an ND filter. I just suck it up and stop down. But having only 1/1000th of a second on an electronic shutter as precise as the one in the M7 is, in my opinion, a huge mistake. I can't believe they did that. Like, you have bulb mode. If you're shooting long exposures, you're using a shutter release cable. You're not gonna hit the shutter with this set to 2 seconds because there's no self-timer. Like, I wanna know the decision making behind that so badly because, in my opinion, that's like the biggest thing that frustrates me, is that I'm stuck with a top shutter speed of 1/1000th of a second when I'm literally never going to use 2 seconds or 4 seconds. Glad I got that off my chest. So Leica, if you make an M7 II and fix these issues, I think I would part with my baby. I think I would sell this and make that purchase, because that would be really nice for portraits during the daytime, especially. All right, you're probably tired of listening to me talk by now, but let me just finish off by singing my praises of this camera one more time. This is a great camera. This has served me so well, and when I bought my MP, everyone was like, hey, sell the M7, you don't need to M bodies, which I really don't, but I'm fortunate enough to be using these as part of my full-time work, and I shoot so much 35mm that having two focal lengths available to me, or a black and white and a color available to me, is a luxury that I'm very blessed to have, but we'll see. Anyway, I will shut up now. I'm happy to do more videos. I have a ton of film cameras, and I travel with my film cameras pretty often, and we'll be documenting my first exhibit on this channel, hopefully if we can ever travel again. So I hope you're all being safe, staying inside, and being productive in some way, I hope. Love you guys, peace out.